Adam, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on Charleston Southern. I did just want to mention that the game occurred. Carolina was, as it should be, a much better team at this point in time than Charleston Southern. But what I did think was relevant, and Carolina wins this game 105-60. It was the most points that a Hubert Davis Carolina team has scored. It was the largest margin of victory for a Hubert Davis Carolina team in his now third year as the head coach. The stats are impressive, as you would expect them to be. He'll shoot 56%. They shoot 42% from three. They have a plus 21 turnover margin. I mean, these really are incredible. 52-12 in the paint, 15-0 fast break, 43-6 bench points. Jalen Washington, career high, 17.7 rebounds. Seth Trimble tied his career high with 12 points, had a career high 6 rebounds. Baycott had 12 points, 9 boards. Cadeau had 13. Ingram had 10. R.J. Davis, the first Tar Heel ever, with 20 points, 10 assists, 5 steals, no turnovers. So there was a lot. But, Adam, what was impressive to me was that at no point did you feel like Carolina coasted in this game. And I don't mean that they were running up the score in any way. I just mean they just were competing from the opening tip until the end of the game, and whether it was R.J. Davis and Armando Baycott out there or if it was Rob Landry and Dewey Ferris out there at the end of the game. Carolina was competing, and I think that's something that we've learned about this team to this point, and something that we assumed would be the case from seeing them in the preseason, is it's not always going to go right, but they are going to go hard. And I think you saw that in this game, even in a game where they were clearly the better team.
Well, I think two things. I think, one, in this silly world that we live in, margin of victory does matter. And the fact that Carolina beat Charleston Southern so significantly by 45 points, when you saw that game on the schedule, you thought, ooh, that's going to hurt the net, Charleston Southern. Not
the almighty net.
Well, it ended up that because Carolina won by such a large margin of victory, the Tar Heels actually moved up, which you would have expected this to be one where you move down even if you win. That's not what happened here. And Carolina hasn't typically been doing that to teams like this, and so to do it was a big deal. And I think the other thing is, I think you left that game thinking, I mean this respectfully, Carolina outclassed Charleston Southern. Like, these two teams are clearly of different classes.
Sure.
There haven't been many times you've thought that the last couple of years, because even the teams that I think you feel like Carolina should outclass, they often play pretty similarly to that team. This one from the tip was, okay, the Tar Heels are the superior squad in every way, and they have set about to prove it for these 40 minutes, and that is what they have done, and now the game is over, and both these teams will depart knowing if they play 10 times, the Tar Heels are winning 10, probably by a lot each time.
Adam, I do think it is worth us just mentioning there was the moment of silence before the game for Eric. There was the tribute video. You and I have both been in some moment of silences before. I don't think I've ever been in a more silent moment of silence. It was a very respectful, emotional, almost reverent moment in the Smith Center. Which I think, again, just speaks to Eric's impact.
And I think the fact that it was accompanied by, when the moment of silence was over, just the spontaneous cheering, like people really needed to cheer, and they were going to do it no matter what. And so the moment of silence is over, and the plan had been to move right on to what was to come next, which was national anthem, starting lineups, but people weren't ready to do that yet. They needed to cheer and show some respect for Eric in some way other than being silent. And I thought that it was really nice the way it just grew upon itself as everyone kind of jumped on board. And we saw a lot of pod folks at that game who were all really nice, and we really appreciate everybody saying hello and all the nice words everybody said. And people, there are a lot more nice people than mean people, and it's been nice to remember that the last few weeks.
I would like to give a particular shout out to Mrs. Cave.
Yeah.
You
got a personal note.
as she said in my note, mother of the cave women.
Ooh.
Of course, Carolina James wins the games, as we know. And I did have a quick chat with her before the game, and her mom had written this very lovely note just expressing her condolences for Eric. But Carolina James, who wins the games, said, she wants to bake you guys something in pure, Southern mama fashion. I was like, oh, well, we're ready for some lasagna or something anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime that she wants to drop it off, we're ready to go.
Bring us a covered dish. Yeah, Carolina James, who wins the games, and Matt Stark were both there and made a special effort to be there and made it clear that they had been there partially for us, which was very nice because we were the littlest, especially me, the littlest part of that day. And so it was really nice to see some familiar faces and hear those words.
Adam, so let's go to Tuesday night. Carolina was in Pittsburgh. This game could not have been any more of a game against Pittsburgh. Carolina started 0 for 10 to start the game. It was their worst start to a game field goal-wise since a 0 for 15 beginning against Georgia Tech in the 2020 season, which I had totally forgotten that game until Steve Kirshner, Tar Heel Ace SID, gave me that note. And Adam, actually, I think that note is actually relevant. I can go back and look it up while you're giving your points on this. In that Georgia Tech game, by the time Carolina scored, it was so far down that it was going to take an incredible effort to come back in the game. And Carolina didn't, as we know, they didn't have a great team that year and had a bunch of injuries and didn't have a good season. In this game, obviously you don't want to start 0 for 10. But Carolina was only down 6-0. And by the time they got their first basket, which was an R.J. Davis three-pointer at, I think I had written down 13:37 was the first basket. So it's in that general area. So by the time they hit their first basket, it's a 3-point game once he makes the shot. And so I do think that speaks to a little bit of how Carolina handled this game. Because the first 20 minutes in particular was just a fight. I mean, Pitt was there to fight, and the referees were letting everybody fight. It was just contact at the rim, and just every rebound was just collisions up in the air, and the ball would pop to somebody. And I mean, it was a physical, aggressive game. And Carolina didn't back down. And what I'm about to say is in no way trying to belittle or talk negative about previous Carolina teams. I think when you combine the fact that the offense wasn't good at the beginning with the fact that Pitt was there to fight, I think there have been times in the past where those two things together would have had Carolina in big trouble. But not on this night. The Tar Heels, and this wasn't an easy win by any stretch. Carolina won by 13. But Carolina kept competing. And they fought and they fought and they fought. And then eventually, because I think Carolina's better than Pitt, that fight mixed with the fact that Carolina, I think, is a better team, slowly showed on the scoreboard to the point that the Tar Heels win by 13. So you and I were sitting there along with librarian Pete right next to the bench. And, I mean, we saw it. There was no doubt that this was an important win for Carolina. They wanted it. The locker room, you could tell with how happy they were afterwards. This was one that they wanted, and that they were pleased with how they got it.
In some ways, the way it began, I think, ended up being beneficial. I think that Carolina will draw on that later this year because you can start 0 for 10. And if you keep defending, you still have a chance to win the game by 13 points. That start reminded me a little, I think it's Phil Ford who tells this story, of when he was coaching with Coach Smith. One of Coach Smith's Carolina teams has started similarly poorly, and they weren't making any shots, but they were getting good shots which I think Carolina was in that 0 for 10 stretch. They just weren't going in. And I think it was Phil Ford looked at Coach Smith and said, are we going to call timeout? Is there going to be a timeout? And Coach Smith looked at me and said, what do you want me to tell the guys? And Phil Ford said that's when he realized, like, Carolina was doing what they needed to do. The ball just wasn't going in the basket. But they didn't panic, and because Coach Smith didn't panic. And I thought in that scenario, the Tar Heels didn't panic because Hubert Davis didn't panic, and he kept rotating in players to try to find the right fit. And then eventually it clicked, and all of a sudden Carolina remembered how to play offense again, and the ball started going in. And because they were only behind 6, I mean, you go 0 for 10 and you're only -6, you've got a really good chance to win the game. And the Tar Heels did. They got great contributions off the bench in the first half from Seth Trimble. I thought he was the reason Carolina was able to lead at halftime. R.J. Davis made the three-pointer that gave Carolina the lead, but Trimble's play and effort and offense and defense was the reason why the Tar Heels were close enough to be able to do that. And then I thought everybody did a little something in the second half, and you could kind of see Pitt give up. Like, what they had come there to do wasn't working, and they didn't have plan B. And Carolina made that happen. And it was a group effort, a really well-coached effort, and that was a really fun Carolina basketball game just because of what's happened with Pitt the last 3 years and what they clearly came to do on Tuesday night and what they weren't able to do and the way Carolina did it. It was just really fun.
Adam, this Georgia Tech game, if I've read this right, the first field goal that Carolina made in that game back in 2020 was at the 6:49 mark of the first half. They had made 6 free throws before they made a field goal. When they made a field goal, a Garrison Brooks jump shot, it made the score 30-8. 30-8. So now that's extreme. Again, if I'm reading that right, the first 6 points, yes, we're all on free throws.
And it was a 0 of 15 start from the field?
And so they were down by 24 points. They made their first basket and cut it to 22. A little different than being down 6-0 and cutting it to 3. Now, again, that was still a longer period of time. But anyway, that was shocking when I went through that, Adam. I didn't hear anything you said when you were talking because I was so mesmerized by this horrid shooting in that game by the Tar Heels. They were down by 20, by the way, at halftime in that game and ended up losing by 13. Adam, I thought that oddly Harrison Ingram kind of was the individual who summed up Carolina as a team in this game. He was 2 for 14 from the field. 1 of 5 from 3. And yet, I still think he was a big part of Carolina's win. He had 15 rebounds, a career high. He had 2 blocks. He had 3 steals, 3 assists, no turnovers. And the 2 field goals he made were both really big. He had a transition layup that gave Carolina a double-digit lead for the first time, and he hit a three-pointer. I believe Pitt had cut the lead to 6, and he hit a 3 to stretch it back out to 9, and Carolina eventually goes on to win by 13. And the only reason that he was still impactful is that he kept competing, even though he was, I think, 0 for 11 before he made his first basket, maybe 0 for 12. And he just kept competing and did other things. And I think he individually kind of summed up Carolina as a team.
Also was a big part of the defense on Blake Henson that really frustrated Henson and led to him being part of that giving in. And I think the fact that Harrison Ingram played 35 minutes while shooting 2 for 14 tells you how important Hubert Davis feels like he is to this team. I really liked how he was right in there in the second half when Pitt decided they were going to talk a little, and he wasn't having that. He wasn't going to have them talking to anybody else on the court wearing a Carolina uniform without him being right there in it. And I like that. You need that on a team, and Carolina hasn't always had that. I think also other teams aren't quite sure. Is Harrison Ingram a little crazy? Like, I think they're a little bit afraid of him.
Yeah, he's got a little edge to him.
Which the Tar Heels need that.
Yes.
I think Cormac Ryan's got a little bit of that. And so I love seeing that come out. And it's really easy to do that when you're playing well, because then you feel like you're the alpha dog and you're going to go out there and show all these guys because you're a lot better than them. It's a lot harder to still have that edge when you're 0 for 8 or 0 for 9 or whatever he was at that point in time, to still go, you know what? These guys are still my teammates. We're still a team. I'm still the leader of this team, and we're not having that. Think of all the times Pitt's done that to Carolina the last couple years, and nobody's done that. So to have him able to step forward and do that, big part of the win.
Just a couple more individual things, and then I want to talk about Tar Heel defense, and then we can move on. I thought Baycott was good in the second half. He ended up with 16 and 10, 5 of 10 from the floor, 6 of 6 free throw line. He was frustrated, I think, some in the first half because he was working hard in a physical game to get position down low, and I don't think he was getting the ball as much as he wanted. But then in the second half, Carolina, I think, made a little more of a concerted effort to get him the ball, and he did good work. I mean, he had 3 offensive rebounds, not a huge total, but he did good work down low, I think, being involved in plays like that. I thought Jalen Withers gave Carolina some good minutes off the bench, and Seth Trimble was really, really good in this game in the first half in particular. Good the whole game, but good, really good in the first half as he continues to be just a very, very steady piece coming off the bench. You know you're going to get some really good defense. You know you're going to get high energy. I think he's pushing the ball well in transition. He's getting it up the floor either by pass or dribble on his own more confidently than in the past, and continues to be a big part of what Carolina's doing.
And he talked about that after the game, because I mentioned to him that you had mentioned that during the game. And he said, I don't like complimenting myself. And he said, but I really do. And you could tell he was proud of it. He said, I really do feel like I've gotten better at that. He said, last year I felt like I just wasn't myself and I made some bad decisions. This year I feel like I've matured and I'm smarter, and that enables me to play faster. The thing with Baycott, in addition to the 3 offensive rebounds, I thought he was a big part of Carolina being efficient with the offensive rebounds they did get, because I think it ended up being 15-1 in second chance points.
Yeah.
Pitt got offensive rebounds, but they weren't able to score with them. And Carolina was able to score with the ones that the Tar Heels got. Baycott was a big part of that. And Withers, to me, that's what Jalen Withers can be. The second half Jalen Withers tipping out the missed free throw, which we've been waiting years for someone to tip out a missed free throw. That used to be a trademark. And then the follow dunk. That's all you got to do, Jalen Withers. You could play 8 minutes a half doing nothing but that, and you will help Carolina be a better team, because that dunk was right in front of us. Nobody can box that out.
No.
He just went over everybody and said, I'm dunking this. And the tip out, like, that's just an effort play and an athleticism play. If he can do that on the offensive glass, Carolina's a much better team.
Hit a couple big free throws in the second half, those kind of things. Adam, anything else from this win over Pitt? Carolina improves to 10-3 and 2-0 in conference play.
Elliot Cadeau diving on the floor. Loved that.
It felt like an important moment in the game, if nothing else. Not that it was in question before that, but I think it was a play that just kind of drew the line in the sand that the Tar Heels were there to compete. He got called for a foul, which is a terrible call. Bad. Hubert Davis, though, I think was very pleased with his effort on the play.
And effort Hubert Davis has been begging for from the entire team. And to have the true freshman do it, he wasn't going to get that ball. We had a great view. Like, was it Carrington who was right there?
I think so.
Carrington's big and tall and long. Like, he was just going to reach down and grab it. And Cadeau decided, I'm diving in there, which I guess is a foul now. But just to make that type of play was exactly what Carolina needed on Tuesday night and needs going forward. You got to keep doing it. You can't just do it the once and be like, I'm proud of myself. All right, I've checked that off. No, you got to keep doing it.
Carolina out-rebounds Pitt 51-41. They were they being Pitt, the number one rebounding team in the ACC, both in number of rebounds and rebound margin coming into the game. Of those 51 rebounds, Ingram and Baycott had 25 of them. So really nice performance on the glass. Adam, Carolina now will see Clemson Saturday at noon. Clemson's had a really good year. It's going to be a hard place to go play. Little John is always a difficult road trip. Clemson is playing very, very well. They have some nice wins. They won at Alabama in that ACC-SEC challenge. They have a win over TCU. P.J. Hall is playing at a really high level, another older ACC player that I think probably the new NIL world allows him to benefit by staying in college instead of maybe trying to force it to the pros earlier than he wanted. And he's a really good college player. He's averaging better than 20 points. He's being efficient. They've added Syracuse transfer Joe Girard. You remember Girard, a very good shooter on the perimeter, and he's knocking in threes at a mid-40s clip. So this is a very good team. And they will never forget that Clemson loves beating Carolina. As we move forward in the college landscape, they love trying to beat Carolina. And so it will be a hot crowd, a difficult environment. Carolina coming off an emotional game with another emotional game afterward as they go to Raleigh to see NC State in the midweek next week. This is going to be a challenge. Carolina's going to need to play well. The Tar Heels can win the game, certainly. They might even be favored. I have no idea. But it's going to be another fight for an ACC road win.
Clemson really shoots the ball well from 2 and from 3. They had P.J. Hall, of course. Girard really gives them this other element. I think Carolina might have a little better depth, maybe a little better talented depth, capable of being impactful. That is sure to ensure that someone from Clemson has always dreamed of going to Carolina and will score 40 on Saturday, so I apologize in advance. But on paper, I think the Tar Heel reserves have a real chance of making an impact in this game and using that depth either to wear Clemson down, either physically or with fouls, maybe get to the free throw line some. Clemson doesn't force very many turnovers, so you've got to take care of the ball and make the most of your possessions because they're going to score, so you have to score. And, we knew this stretch was going to be tough. 3 tough road games in a row. Tigers are good, and the Tar Heels think they're good too.
I did want to mention Carolina's defense because you're talking about how well Clemson shoots it. So the Oklahoma game and the Charleston Southern game, Carolina forced a combined 30 turnovers, and I think it was 19 steals in those 2 games. Those numbers not as high against Pitt. Carolina still had 5 steals and 7 blocks in the game. Pitt had just 8 turnovers in the game. But Carolina forced Pitt to shoot 31% from the field and 5 of 29 from three-point range. They came in averaging nearly 10 makes per game from 3. Adam, Carolina's defense has been good. I think of those 3 teams, 2 of them are pretty good in Oklahoma and Pitt. The Charleston Southern game, Carolina was more gifted, but still had to go do it. And we talked about this after the Kentucky game, I thought Kentucky just made some difficult shots at times. I didn't think Carolina was bad defensively in that game. It just seems like the Tar Heels are taking some steps defensively.
Yeah, I think the worst the Carolina defense has looked this year was against UConn, which I also think is the most elite offensive team that Carolina has played, that played really well on that night, made some shots, which made them even better. And since then,
does everything look better when the ball goes in the basket?
That's what I've always said.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's universal agreement on that. I don't know if it'll ever catch on, but that's just a little saying that I muttered to myself.
Yeah.
Since then, I do feel like the Tar Heels have played a little better defensively. You've got the stalwart under the basket in Baycott. You've got some guards who are willing to show some toughness, and especially Trimble coming off the bench, who I think gives you that element that sort of drives everyone else. Because if he's going to defend like that in limited minutes, everyone else has got to do it too. You don't have the leaky black guy who you're just like, all right, go get him, and then you don't worry about that guy anymore. But you've always got 5 on the court who communicate for the most part and cover for each other and understand what the team is trying to do. And sometimes that's better than having the one individual and then 4 other guys.
I mean, Ryan's a gritty defender. Ingram's a gritty defender. I think Washington is a good defender when he comes in. He's a presence in shot blocking. And Hubert Davis has said he feels like Washington is Carolina's best post defender right now. And
then you got Elliot Cadeau, the hatchet man.
Yeah.
Who's going to foul every single time.
So
stop fouling 3-point shooters. The Tar Heels did it against Pitt again.
Just once. That's progress.
Yeah, that's right. Good job, guys. B-.
So anyway, certainly a fun win for the Heels on Tuesday. This road stretch is difficult. And it's not like they have Syracuse at home when they get back, and Syracuse is playing well. I know they lost to Duke earlier this week. That was a close game for most of the game. Duke got really hot in the second half. So, tough stretch. It's going to be tough. It's ACC play. A lot of road games this month, but a good way to start it.